if you would, please.
Thank you. I'm really just here to give an update on statistics to date, which I thought the commission wanted to have more information on. So this is live kitten update, live kitten, sorry, intake. So we removed all the dead on arrivals. From March 1st to September 30th for each fiscal year, for the past 3 years. So you can see that this year we have a pretty significant intake of 100 additional kittens. Don't know the reason for that. On the community cats front, the last time we talked about this, there were 12 groups of queens that had been left in the field. It's now 13. We still have the same group of 4 that died within a few days of being called. Still the same group that was adopted by the neighbor. 2 groups that went into Tony's Kitty Rescue separate from community cats. The same 3 groups that have not returned calls. And now instead of 5 groups going in through trap neuter release, we have 6. Okay, so year to date, we have 41 nursing queens that have been brought to ACC. 27 went through foster. 14 were not fostered. Of the 41, 12 were feral or semi-feral. 7 were fostered through TKR, and you can see on the left-hand side of the screen where those cats went after fostering. So 1 went back to us for return to field, 2 went to the community cats, 2 went to Give Me Shelter, and 2 went to SPCA. On the right side of the screen are the 5 that were not fostered, and 1 went to Hensley Barn Cats, 2 went to Marin Friends of Ferals, 1 was at Medical Euthanasia, and 1 went to SPCA. So that is the update on kittens and feral queens for this year. Any questions?
Any questions from commissioners?
Well, we had a chance to talk a little while ago because I missed the meeting prior, so I was just clarifying some of the information that I found in the meeting minutes. And if you wanted to comment on those issues that we talked about, specifically the policy as is stays where if the kittens are at risk, the queens and kittens are at risk, or if the public brings in the kittens.
If the queens or the kittens are at risk, or if the public brings them in, this is part of that 41.
Okay.
And of that 41, only 12 were feral or semi-feral, so a lot of the family groups we get in are just somebody's cat who had kittens, and it might be their cat that they're bringing with all the kittens, or it might just be a neighborhood cat. And those cats have no issue. Well, go on in a shelter, but those cats are very easy to care for and to foster.
And just to confirm, it was just the one that was released back into San Francisco. The others went into feral placement outside the city when they were DNR'd?
No, they get returned to
Of the
total 5.
Of the feral, not adoptable, I thought you said Hensley Barn Cats, Brain Friends, that those groups took the 5.
They took those 5, and then of the 7 that were fostered, we released 1 to the field. I assume community cats released 2 to the field, so that would be 3. Give Me Shelter took 2, and SPCA took 2, presumably for adoption, but that's generally what we'll do. But I can't absolutely answer that for sure.
Director Donahue, I have one question. Since the last meeting, a few of the commissioners met with Supervisor Sakai and one of his aides about the issue to discuss the issue, and he was interested in just connecting with you at ACC to talk about it.
Could you speak a little louder?
Sorry,
We can't hear very well.
sure. Between, after last month's meeting, we, a few of us commissioners, myself, Commissioner Van Horn, and Commissioner Torres spoke with Supervisor Sakai and one of his aides about this issue. And they said that their action item was to connect with you to discuss and get more information. Have they connected with you?
I have not heard from Supervisor Safai. I have heard from Supervisor Mandelman, and we are meeting later this month. I can't remember the exact date off the top of my head.
Any further questions from commissioners? Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Donahue, for the presentation. Is there public comment on this issue?
Hi, I'm Maria Conlon from King Shelter Cat Rescue, co-director. I just want to say again, we still want to, well, first of all, I'm kind of curious because I don't think any of the cats King Shelter took out were semi-feral or feral. So I'm not sure which cats those were. I mean, they may have behaved that way in the shelter, but they certainly were not that way with us because I can't think of which cats those were. So, and I'm the one that takes all the cats, so just so you know. So sometimes I think like an assessment of a cat in the shelter is much different than what a cat is like actually outside of the shelter. But still, I wanted to say that, we stand our ground. We want them to reverse this policy. We want them to send out the trappers for when the people call in about the moms and kittens, so that they're, of course, we're at the tail end of kitten season now, so it's sort of like we want to just be ready for next year. We also want to say that I know one of the things we were going to talk to the supervisors about was whether ACC was responsible for these kittens or cats, the feral cats or not, and the municipal code again does not include feral cats as wild animals, and ACC's open mission statement is open mission shelter saying that they take in all animals, so then I would again say that they're responsible for these feral moms and kittens, or semi-feral or feral in the shelter moms and kittens. Is that my time?
No.
Okay. And then just that we want the policy reversed, and that a lot of these cats are just simply scared in the shelter, and it's not that they're actually feral at all. And just because a cat hisses, swats, or doesn't like to be picked up, doesn't mean the cat's feral. There are a lot of homed cats that have those particular behaviors. You put them in a hostile environment, and that's any kennel. It's not anything against ACC, it's any kennel. It's hostile, it's stressful, you're reaching into their environment and they're threatened, period. So we just want this policy reversed, and we're just gonna keep at it until we get it. Thanks.
Thank you. Actually, I apologize, we're going to pause the public comment. I'm sorry. We're going to pause the public comment at this point because the commissioners did not finish our discussion, and I'd like to finish the discussion amongst the commissioners before proceeding with public comment. I do apologize for that. I think that out of sequence threw me off a little bit. So we're going to continue our discussion, and Dr. Van Horn has something to add about his conversations.
Just to make everything clear to everybody before we go to public comment, like what was mentioned earlier, a few of us did go and talk to a couple of supervisors just to request that they take some time and determine exactly what the city's responsibility level is to cats, so that we can even begin to make recommendations as a commission. So that part of it, I just wanted to be out there before we started taking on public comments, that we've kind of currently put that back on the lap of higher officials to give us some direction on how responsible they feel for cats in the community.
Do any other commissioners have comments on this issue? Any other updates from commissioners on this issue? Okay, so we'll continue with our public comment at this point. Oh, please, anyone on this public comment?
May, I've trapped at least 3 moms and
kittens and litters of kittens in the last couple of months. And I've seen specific reasons why trappers should be allowed to go out immediately and trap the mothers and kittens. By the time I got there, we got 3 of the kittens, we got the mom. One of the kittens was actually stuck in a hole. It's actually stuck in a hole, and I had to go through an entire backyard to find him and to get him out of the hole. Luckily, I was able to do that. That doesn't happen when you have younger kittens because they don't go far from the mom. But the older they get, the more they stray, and that's what happens. He was lucky. The other kittens I trapped, some of them were on the very verge of, because they were older, they were on the very verge of going feral. And the last situation, there was no action taken on the trapping at all, which means that the kittens grew up to be juveniles. And there was another litter of kittens that was born. And, you know, these things need to be nipped in the bud. Trappers need to be informed as soon as people call to say their mothers and kittens out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi there, my name's Sonia Vnakis. We're still plugging away at this. We still want the policy reversed. It's very important. We really need help. We need your help. We need the supervisors to help get this done. There's no justification for leaving cats out longer. There's no justification for not connecting the public with volunteer trappers who are volunteers. They are not staff of Animal Care and Control or SPCA. They are volunteers. The volunteers want to help. Please let us help. We're willing to trap. We're willing to foster. We're willing to socialize. At least let us have the connection with the public so that we can save some lives. What is the problem with this? Why is this possibly a problem? You know that if you let kittens out for 3 months or longer, they're going to be really hard to make adoptable. The longer you wait, the harder they are to socialize. The earlier we get them, the earlier we get kittens and their feral moms into a foster situation where they are safe, warm, cared for, fed, treated for fleas or any other issues, the higher the mortality rate will drop. The amount of feral cats out there will drop. We will not have so many kittens born into the wild if we can fix them. Why delay this? It doesn't make any logical sense. And this is no extra work for the shelter staff. We're talking about allowing volunteers to do what we want to do to help these animals. You know, a case could be made that the shelter should be doing a lot more than they are, but at least permit the volunteers to do what we want to do to help. It's absolutely irrational not to let this happen. We really want this policy reversed. Please do the right thing. Animal Care and Control staff, management, please do the right thing. Why not? If you care about animals, please do the right thing. Otherwise, maybe that's not the right line of work. Thank you.
Any other public comment? No?
I'd like to say something
Yeah.
about this issue. So I'm a huge proponent of TNR, but I think when cats, the reality is that cats do have a negative impact on migratory songbirds. So I know feral cats shouldn't be killed just because they're feral, but we shouldn't be keeping cats out longer than necessary just because we should be thinking about their impacts on wildlife as well. I know there's this concern that like kittens, neonatal kittens and their moms don't do well in shelters, but they also don't do well being eaten alive by coyotes or getting their mother getting hit by cars and then them starving because she's not there to nurse them. So it makes sense to me that the cats shouldn't be left out in the field longer than necessary. And I support all these folks and think that they're fighting the right cause for this.
Any further public comment on this issue? All right, seeing none, thank you all. We are going to move on. So again, I apologize for the disruption in the agenda, but we're going to go back to New business to euthanasia protocol at San Francisco Care and Control. In rare cases, animals that are brought to ACC are euthanized. The review of the protocols, including notification of partner organizations when euthanasia is advised. Peter McCoskey will speak, and Russell Stonowski will lead this discussion.
Sure, thanks. This was, Mr. McCoskey brought this up to our attention in the last meeting regarding a dog that he found and brought into animal care and control that was then euthanized without he or the partner rescue organization, I believe it was Rocket Dog Rescue, being alerted to that happening. Apparently Rocket Dog Rescue was going to take the dog and place the dog and foster the dog and work with the dog's medical issues, as was Mr. McCoskey. So this just kind of seems to be, the reason I wanted to bring it up was it just seems to be an ongoing issue from the feral cat discussion, where there are all of these rescue organizations and partner organizations that have worked with the ACC in the past and seemingly work with the ACC now, but from, if you listen to the activists, I guess, and the rescue people are being somewhat pushed aside when there are animals involved and they think that they can help animals and rescue these animals. So I just kind of wanted to further that discussion and see where we can go with this and see if we can kind of clarify this at all. And Mr. Markowski is here to speak. He is a long-time activist in the rescue community. I've known about him for years and years. I've literally seen pictures of him all over the country rescuing animals in the worst situations you can imagine, from New Orleans, I believe you've been to. I've seen him knee-deep in the nastiest waters. You were up at the campfire too, I believe.
I didn't help with that.
Sorry, but I know you've been to other, you were in, sorry. I think you helped with the rescue in Napa when there was the earthquake, or I know I've seen you all over the country. And just a little other background on him. He's, I think, originally from New York, or has lived in New York, and he started his own nonprofit rescue organization, Brooklyn Empty Cages Collective, which worked with the New York Animal Care and Control to rescue animals from there and place them in homes and foster them and whatnot. So like I said, he's a long-time activist. He's been involved in this community not only in San Francisco, but around the country. Puts his own time and effort, just like all of the other rescue people in the community here. So hopefully you can give a little background on here, and we can kind of move forward the same way we guys can move forward with the feral cat issue to see what we can do. Obviously, we're not SPUDS people or mediators in any situation, but we can kind of work hopefully to find a solution to this and do the best of what we're all here for, is help the animals of San Francisco. So hopefully, PJ, if you have a little presentation,
I didn't do a PowerPoint, but there's some things, and I have some draft legislation I'd like to share with you after I'm done speaking. Thanks for letting me
Can you
speak.
speak into the microphone a little bit more, so we can hear you better?
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things I want to start off with is, and I'm pulling data from 2017 because the data that's available on SFACC's website ignores animals other than dogs and cats, which is problematic. But so, just so we're grounded in why I'm here. In the fiscal year of 2017, San Francisco Animal Control killed 1,418 animals: dogs, cats, bats, hamsters, pigeons, skunks. Each one of them was a sentient being who mattered and whose life was precious to themselves. That was 202 dogs, 231 cats, 985 other animals. And that means during that time, SFACC was killing nearly 4 animals every day based on that fiscal year. Almost 4 animals a day isn't a rarity. It's not an uncommon rarity. That may be better than some shelters. It is also it's worse in many areas that are being seen as far less progressive than ours. Austin, Texas, and the state of Delaware aren't generally seen as being a hotbed of humane action about animals, but they are doing better than San Francisco. Regardless, 1,418 animals is still far too many animals in the city named after St. Francis. A 90% live release rate isn't the end goal, it is the bare minimum of where we should be in 2019, and we aren't even there for all species. As I mentioned at last month's meeting in August, I found the abandoned puppy in the Tenderloin. He was dumped by someone and tied very tightly to a fence. He was terrified and most likely was the victim of abuse or at least neglect in the form of under-socialization. I spent at least 2 hours with the dog, who ACC would name Floppy, while waiting for SFACC to arrive to retrieve him. Before contacting Animal Control, I spoke with Paley, the founder of Rocket Dog Rescue. She committed to taking the dog if no one ever reclaimed him. Paley gave me instructions on putting a CIP, call interested party in place for the dog with ACC, and explicitly stated that I had the right to put Rocket Dog Rescue Paley's name on the dog to be a pool partner. I attempted this several times. I told the ACO who picked him up, I told the operator, so basically when I called the next day, and I was eventually told they wouldn't let me pull the dog, and the CIP policy had been discontinued. Director Donahue had discontinued it at the end of April. I reiterated that Rocket Dog Rescue would be willing to pull the dog. I explained that I was willing to fundraise for the dog's behavioral needs, and gave Paley's private cell phone again, and begged them basically to call before making any life or death decisions. Made repeated attempts to ensure Floppy's safety, only to find out that SFACC never bothered calling Paley, they never called me. SFACC killed Floppy after only 7 days. During that time, Floppy was given no real veterinary care, so we have no idea if injury was impacting his aggressive behavior. The reality is, if an agency can inject an animal with Fatal Plus, they can inject an animal to sedate them, to do a proper physical exam and imaging as necessary, even if Floppy's behavior was fearfully aggressive and he was not properly socialized. Rocket Dog Rescue already knew that, as did I. Other shelters, like the one I worked with when I ran my organization exclusively took animals that were scheduled to be euthanized from the shelter. Injured, under-socialized, dogs with parvo, cats with panleukopenia, cats who had fallen 10 stories from a building that had multiple fractures. Other shelters like New York City Animal Care and Control have their rescue partners in cases like this sign a liability waiver for dogs like Floppy. And they collectively come up with a behavioral evaluation and treatment plan that meets the protection of public safety while offering consideration for the animals. There is no reason why this wasn't seen as an option for Floppy or any other dog with similar behavior. Killing should be treated as a last resort, not a first defense. After doing open records requests, I found out that San Francisco Animal Care and Control called only 2 rescue organizations about Floppy before killing him, and not even the one who had showed interest, Rocket Dog Rescue. San Francisco Animal Control claims they have over 100 rescue partners, at least 50 of those, let's say, rescue dogs. It was also clear in Chameleon that I had called repeatedly and reiterated RDR's willingness to help this dog. In a letter in response to one of my concerns, Director Donahue wrote, while we strive to find response to while we strive to find placement for every animal in our care, if an animal is behaviorally or medically unsound and no adoption partner is able to assist, we proceed with euthanasia. Apparently, striving to find placement for every animal means ignoring clear interest in the form of CIP. It means getting rid of that policy. It means ignoring a rescue partner notation in Chameleon, and it means contacting only 2 out of 100 rescue partners. And Floppy's case isn't an isolated incident, as open records requests I thought. Since at least 1994, Animal Control has been killing every single bat that has entered the shelter, regardless of if there was a public health concern to do so. No one bothered to revisit this policy since the early 90s, until I started raising concerns about it and applying pressure. This policy has resulted in the unjust killing of hundreds, perhaps thousands of bats. Bats are already in trouble ecologically, and the last thing a progressive animal welfare agency should be doing is carte blanche killing all of them. Yet this is what has been going on with decades, without question. Last year, San Francisco Animal Care and Control took in 604 pigeons. They killed 251 of them, while only sending 131 to wildlife rehabilitators. Contrary to the email I got 45 minutes ago, before this meeting from Director Donahue, I confirmed with the organization who has been accepting pigeons from San Francisco Animal Control that they never instructed SFACC to euthanize all birds for the reasons they are. Just because an animal is sick or injured doesn't mean they can't be successfully treated to recovery. Broken bones, neurological symptoms, and other issues are not reasons to kill pigeons if a rescue organization is willing to take them and give them medical care. When I was a licensed wildlife rehabilitator in New York, I successfully treated hundreds of birds with the very same issues that SFACC is killing them for. In my research, I also learned of Ellen, a bully breed dog found in Golden Gate Park with her 2 newborn puppies. She was impounded by San Francisco Animal Control with her 2 pups. She was a good mom, energetic and playful. She was adoptable, maybe not to every single person, but to the right home, and was apparently a volunteer favorite. Yet that didn't stop the current culture of animal care and control from operating like this. After only contacting 5 of their 100+ rescue partners about taking her, they killed her. There are many other animals of various species who have been killed that I cannot do justice during this short time of me speaking. But the fact remains, not enough is being done to save lives. The reality is rescue organizations cannot help animals they do not know about, especially when they aren't given the right information about the animals or just how urgent it is for that particular animal. Members of the public can't help and offer their skills and talents if they are pushed out in the process. The public cannot support animal rescue organizations pulling animals from open admission shelters if they don't know what their needs are and the issue, the problem itself. There is a need for San Francisco Animal Care and Control for transparency, accountability, and true collaboration that is not being heeded, and animals are suffering and being killed as a result. And I think that means, to me, the CIP policy should be reinstated.
Yes.
There's no good reason a safety net like this was gotten rid of to begin with. The Good Samaritan policy is not adequate and wasn't even offered when I called about Floppy. Who else isn't it being offered to who's calling about animals they're concerned with? San Francisco Animal Care and Control should be required to inform finders and all their rescue partners of animals who are at risk of being killed 48 hours in advance. Even animals with medical issues or behavioral medical issues who be transferred to veterinarians and behavioral issues should be offered to rescue organization, as is being done in other cities. When I ran a nonprofit animal rescue in New York, we pulled very sick animals from New York City Animal Control. Like I said, parvo, canine influenza, multiple broken bones, diaphragmatic hernias from hit by cars, and other traumatic injuries. 9 times out of 10, these animals recovered after treatment and were adopted out, or in the case of other species, released or sent to sanctuaries. Of course, the only way options can be found for animals like these is if people actually know about them. New York City Animal Care and Control, who I wasn't the biggest fan of when I ran, but now I wish San Francisco was more like, learned several years ago the life-saving benefits of being more transparent and open about the animals who are at risk. And they now publish all the animals that they're going to kill on Facebook 40 hours in advance. And what this does is it causes collaboration, it causes networking, it causes people to be like, I'll donate for that animal's veterinary care. And people are aware of the animals and what their needs are. And you guys can look at this. They have it's called the At-Risk Animals in New York City. The Animal Care and Control, they run this Facebook group now. And I'm going to give you this legislation. I'm going to hand out draft legislation. Some of you may have already seen. I believe that at San Francisco Animal Control should be encouraged to have an immediate policy change that requires notification of finders and rescue organizations about animals they are going to put down. In the end, however, this needs to be a legislative issue, as exhausting options to save lives is too important to be left up to the fickle nature of shifting people in power, personalities, and differing priorities. If these policies or laws existed, Floppy and Ellen and countless others would still be alive. And ironically, the legislation that I'm going to hand out to you about notification of telling people who surrender animals, telling all the rescue organizations about animals that are scheduled to be killed, just passed today in Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas, who has a better save rate than San Francisco. They still thought it was important enough to put it into law and protect it. My hope is the Commission will take decisive action on this issue. The people and the animals of San Francisco deserve better than we are giving. Should I hand this legislation?
Yeah, absolutely. We can pass it around.
Okay.
Thanks. I guess, are there questions or comments? I'm sure a lot of the public have some comments. I guess I will share with her because she can certainly answer some of these questions that people probably have. but we have some other people here who obviously I think can answer some of those questions. So I don't know how we want to proceed.
I have a question, Dr. Donahue, how was the CIP policy changed? Like, what has changed? And I don't know all the details about
I
that.
have as well.
So the CIP program has been replaced by 2 different programs. There was a lot of confusion about what CIP meant. So now we've retained Finder to Adopt, which means you come in with an animal and you say you want to adopt that animal, we put it on our file, and if the animal becomes available, we call you and you can adopt the animal. If you are interested in the animal, but you don't want to adopt, you can elect to have a Good Samaritan call status. That is, you are somebody who's interested, but you're not making a commitment. If you are one of our adoption partners, then we contact you based on the animals we have. It used to be that we sent out blanket notifications to everyone about everything we had, and for our very busy and understaffed adoption partners, it became spam. It was,
I think this is the emergency.
Yes, it's the emergency testing.
Okay.
There's no emergency.
There is no, we just had started. I got a
Thank
notice
you.
on that. Yeah, we're okay.
Thank you, please continue.
okay. So getting all these notifications all the time just became too much and too much for them to it was too much to sift through. So now we have this, a person on staff who is the coordinator with all the adoption partners and who has a matrix of what the criteria are for each partner. So we contact partners with animals that meet their criteria. We have found that we're getting more animals to our partners and we're getting them out faster because we are not burdening them with phone calls and requests about animals that they cannot handle. In terms of the issue about bats, we have told Mr. McCoskey that we will talk to the health department. The health department is the final arbiter of this issue because in San Francisco every year we have bats who test positive for rabies. Rabies is 100% fatal. The Office of Communicable Disease takes this very seriously, and they are revisiting with us the circumstances in which we need to test for rabies, and of course testing for rabies means we have to euthanize the bat. So we're going back to the Department of Health to recheck that issue. So we'll get back to you once we know more from them. In terms of pigeons, we send 130 some pigeons last year to WildCare. We send the pigeons based on the criteria that WildCare gives us. If WildCare is going to need to euthanize the pigeon, we do that instead of sending the pigeon up to WildCare for them to do it. If we have a question about a particular animal, we call WildCare and say, is this a candidate or not a candidate? So the veterinary team deals with that directly with WildCare. On Floppy, Floppy was very aggressive. We provided Floppy with enrichment, and we provided Floppy with anti-anxiety drugs. Floppy did not improve after 8 days. We did offer him to 2 partners who will take aggressive animals, and both of them declined. One of them looked at him twice and declined the second time. Rocket Dog Rescue is really very, very familiar with our processes. Rocket Dog Rescue never contacted us to say they wanted to take Floppy. And there are 2 people at Rocket Dog Rescue authorized to speak for the organization, and Mr. McCoskey is not one of them. In the case of Ellen, Ellen was the pregnant mom with the babies, and the babies were placed. She weaned them at the shelter. The shelter is very, very fond of Ellen. We spent a long time with her. She was made available, she was placed for adoption. The adoption was not successful. We sent a behaviorist out to the adopter's home to see if we could make this adoption stick. It still did not work. And we offered her to 7 different partners, none of whom would take her. So very sadly for every staff person and volunteer involved, Ellen was euthanized.
Ellen was healthy, Ellen was killed.
Excuse me. Director Donahue has the floor now. You're welcome to come up and speak when she's done, but let's give her the respect, please. Did you have anything else to add?
I think that covers all the points, unless the commissioners have specific questions.
I do have a question for you. So if I understand properly, the CIP was replaced by 2 programs. And then from my understanding, Mr. McCoskey would have fallen under the Good Samaritan clause of this new policy, and then therefore would have received an interest call, and apparently that didn't happen.
But not before a decision. The Good Samaritan call does not give you the power to make the decision.
Right.
And in this case, the animal was determined to be dangerous. So he would be notified, or he could be notified of an outcome, and he certainly can call us. But that was part of the reason we moved away from calling it CIP, because there was confusion with people thinking that meant they were the decision maker.
And if Mr. McCoskey he was the finder of the animal, and if he had said that he would adopt it, then he would have gotten a call.
Finder to adopt,
Finder
and
to
then
adopt.
we would have said, hey, here are all these conditions, we think this animal is dangerous. And, then we have a discussion about, okay, are you really equipped to do this? What are you gonna do? How are you gonna deal with this?
So in the case of animals that Animal Care and Control deems too dangerous or not candidates for rehabilitation, those animals can in fact be adopted by the finder under certain conditions and
Under certain conditions.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, there are some finders who can handle that, but that needs to be case-by-case, conversation-based.
Thank you for clarifying.
And just to be clear, so the problem would have been avoided if at intake initially he was listed as finder to adopt at that
Well,
stage.
yeah, it wouldn't have been entirely avoided.
It would have been more preventable, because he would have been contacted before euthanasia, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yes, but I think our advice still would have been, this dog is really, really dangerous.
Or at least the conversation could
The conversation could have happened. The outcome for Floppy might not have been any different.
That's still, I guess, was the understanding that Rocket Dog Rescue was going to.
No, Rocket Dog Rescue never called. Peter McCoskey said he was speaking for Rocket Dog Rescue, but he is not authorized to speak for them. They have a form that they give us on who's authorized to speak for them.
It was my understanding that one of the representatives from Rocket Dog Rescue did speak to ACC in this instance.
According to Mr. McCoskey, we have no record of Haley ever asking for this dog or coming to the shelter. And Haley is obviously really familiar with our operation.
Director Donahue, I have a couple questions. Just to be clear, the CIP policy was changed into these 2 new policies. I just want to understand the reason why. Is it so that there is more of a discussion or more control by ACC as far as where the animals go, or what was the reasoning?
Well, the first reason was that the public and everybody involved in the process was confused about what CIP meant. Like, what did that, if you put down CIP, does that mean, a lot of people thought that meant they were the decision maker. They would be deciding if the animal was healthy enough to adopt or safe enough to adopt or whatever it was. The CIP policy never worked exactly the way Mr. McCoskey is describing it, but in terms of reaching out to our adoption partners, we used to do more of a blanket outreach, and our adoption partners were telling us it was ineffective, and it was proving to be ineffective because we weren't getting return calls, we weren't getting return emails. And so by directing our outreach to the right organizations, we've improved our results.
Okay, I think that kind of helps answer the second question, but I'll ask it anyway. So this Facebook page program that Mr. McCoskey is suggesting that New York does, where they post all the animals 48 hours in advance, is that something that ACC would consider?
I haven't looked at it, so I don't know. I can say that a lot of times postings like that result in a lot of people calling the shelter and saying, you know, don't, you know, we'll give you funds, don't euthanize this animal, but actually no organization that can actually handle the animal stepping forward, because that's not how adoption partners work.
And just to be clear, the policy changed in April of 2019 to the two programs that replace a contact interested person. Since then, getting all the kinks worked out, what's the general process like for either having an ACO pick up an animal from an interested party or bringing an animal into the shelter? I mean, what's explained to people? Just tell me how it goes now as far as the protocol. If I have a dog I find in the park, ACO either comes out and gets it or I take it down and say, here, ACC.
Yeah, that hasn't changed at all.
But I mean, just what's told to the people that are surrendering these animals in terms of their options for either being a interested party or going out and basically trying to advocate for this animal in some way, or whether it's an ACO or they're taken to ACC, is there any protocol to make the surrendering or finding Good Samaritan people sort of aware of the options?
Yes, we've changed the code in the computer, but the messaging to your finder is basically the same. It's, which, you know, great, thank you for bringing this animal in. If the guardian does not step forward, would you be interested in adopting this animal? And that's always been the same. And they can say yes or no.
So it's been more of an internal change.
It's a no, you know, it's like more of a computer thing. And then frequently people will say, I'm not interested, or I can't adopt, or I, you know, have a no animal clause in my lease, but please let me know and maybe I'll be able to help find a home. So so then if it becomes, unlike Floppy, who we determined was too dangerous, if it becomes an animal that goes up for adoption, we will call them and say, hey, just so you know, the animal you found, XYZ, is on the adoption floor. You know, you tell your friends. It's just part of our marketing, trying to move animals out.
What efforts were made to educate rescue partners in the change of policy that you have regarding CIPs? Because I think the problem started with miscommunication about what the policy might have been at ACC.
I don't think there was a miscommunication. Mr. McCoskey is not an adoption partner. Rocket Dog Rescue knows exactly how this works.
This seems to be more of an ongoing issue with other organizations. All these people are from the feral cat community saying the exact same thing.
No, actually, the people from the feral cat community are saying something a little different. They are saying that they should be called about every...
They're saying that you changed their policy without letting them know. That's their main issue. That's what and that's why I brought this up, was because it seems to be a continuation that there are all these rescue organizations that are having problems with the ACC rescuing animals.
I disagree. Mr. McCoskey is not and has never been an adoption partner.
I spoke
so
to
the
Bailey.
change
She
in
didn't know
policy
that the CIP
does
policy-
not
Now your
affect
turn.
him.
When will it be my turn?
And I understand that, but as I said, there seem to be other all these feral cat people. There seems
Stop
to
interrupting the proceedings.
Everybody stand up who agrees.
So it's just, that seems to be what Jane is saying. that just seems to be, as I said, that's why, part of the reason I brought up this issue was that this seems to be, from the rescue community, this seems to be an issue they're coming to us about. So that's why we're bringing this up, and we're bringing this up for 4 or 5 months in a row, is that for some reason, the rescue community seems to be having an issue with ACC and the communication of the animals, what's going on with the animals, the availability of the animals, what's happening to the animals, and it just, that seems to be why we're here.
I think that why we're here about feral cats is the veterinary community has determined that it is inhumane and against the adult cat's welfare to bring the cat in for 4 weeks and make the cat suffer for a month.
Of
So
which you
the
changed your
stories-
policy, correct?
So the stories about kittens coming in at 3 months is completely irrelevant to
That's
the
not,
policy.
but the policy changed, correct?
The policy absolutely changed.
And the rescue community has an issue with the policy being changed and not being made aware of the policy being changed and then working with the policy. So that seems to be the issue kind of here, and then now it's coming up again with a call interested party issue that seems to have been changed. She asked about the rescue community being told about this, and you're basically saying, no, they weren't really told.
No, actually, I didn't say that. What I said was
She understood the
Mr.
question.
Malkowski is
Yeah.
not a member of
I don't
the
think-
rescue
Right.
committee.
Director Donahue, she was asking, did you, in what way after April or before April, did you inform your rescue partners of this change?
Just the language
If you
change,
had.
the call interested party means this, so
Uh,
they could inform people.
For our adoption partners, we have this adoption coordinator now who works directly with them, who
So it's a little,
orally
it's a
told
little
them
different.
about the
Like,
change.
Muttville doesn't go and put a CIP on a dog because we have a relationship with ACC. We communicate directly with them, so we don't ever put CIPs down.
Right, we call them because, well, we call them for dogs that are generally over 7 and who we know meet the criteria for their environment. So we will not call them with about a 4-year-old dog who's dog aggressive, because that does not fit Muttville's criteria. And we used to sort of blanket everybody with all this, and it was just superbly unhelpful.
I guess I want to go back and clarify my original question, because I get all that. My question is, Haley was out there with information that's outdated, and communicating that to PJ. So then that, I think, broke down how to actually talk to ACC about your connection, your interest, so I don't know if it changed the outcome, honestly, but what I do know is that from the very beginning, you had a rescue partner out there giving incorrect information about what to do with that, or how the process works. So I guess what I'm saying is further, like, the question I had further is more like, what efforts are made to make sure that the rescue partners are informed about this? Because it could happen, somebody could call, they're like, oh, I know Muttville does this, so I'm gonna ask them, like, what do I do with this dog I brought to ACC? And, you know, you have a different relationship, but it might be different for every person, so I guess I just wanna make sure that at least that's ironed out, the rescue partners know how to speak to.
I think our adoption partners know how to work this process. And generally speaking, an adoption partner would not tell the finder to do that. The adoption partner would call us and say, hey, I got a call from so-and-so, do you have such and such, is it a match for me? It is unusual for an adoption partner to put that burden on the finder. But the adoption partners all know how this works, and, you know,
They know the policy change, or the
Well,
policy, the
it's-
naming
it's-
conventions are different.
yes, and the naming convention really was, the change in the naming was done so that, one, the public wasn't confused about what it meant, and two, the adoption partners get more focused, relevant information. Because they don't have the time to sort through, you know, a bunch of different requests. They want to know what's relevant to them.
And if someone from the public, if I were to go find a dog right now, call and say, hey, I have this stray, I'd like to put a CIP on it. The person who's answering that call is gonna explain to me the difference.
The difference, and
Yeah.
most members of the public are not
Say that.
saying CIP.
Right,
They're
but
saying-
if they had heard from someone, if they called,
Yeah, we would tell them, oh, this is what you can do, you
Yeah.
wanna adopt this dog, fine, bring it in,
or
and,
there's a
you know,
Good Samaritan call, got it.
right. You can go either way.
Just to clarify, Director Donahue, and maybe this from my own clarification as well, so the naming conventions are more for members of the public. The adoption partners contact you directly just about the animals.
Yeah, the naming conventions are how we record things in the computer, how we keep track of, you know, is there somebody out there who wants to adopt this dog? There'll be, you know, a finder to adopt, so when the dog makes it through the 5-day hold, waiting for the possible owner, when it comes up on the computer, before we just put the, let's say dog in this case, on the adoption floor, we'll call the finder and say, hey, this dog you brought in is available, are you still interested?
But those codes are not used for adoption partners, right? Or are they?
No,
No.
no, that's finder
that's
to
what I'm
adopt,
thinking,
no,
right?
no, they're,
It's not relevant.
no.
Okay, well, so then one little follow-up I'd ask or recommend, is it possible to notify the rescue partners? Just a reiteration of this is the language, this is the status, this is how it's reported, and if you do run into this situation.
Yeah, we could put out, you know, something like, you know, we have somebody who, you know, we have some confusion on this, so just reiterate this is how it works. We can do that.
I will say, like personally from Mudville, we do get phone calls often about people who call that have strays that do not fit Mudville's criteria at all, like it'll be a puppy, and they don't know what to do. And I haven't answered a call in a while, but for the longest time, I would say that you can take it to your local municipal shelter and put a CIP on it, a CIP stands for this, and explain the process. That said, if they were to call any shelter and say that, the shelter would respond with whatever their policy is. But I think it'd be helpful just for rescues to know the shift.
Sure, I'm not sure if anything went out in writing, there have been a lot of conversations, but I can double check that, and even if we did, we could reiterate it again.
Yes. And on the website?
Will the adoption partners come use this?
No, if you find a lost or stray animal.
Yeah, I can see what the language is there, but we would not discuss CIP in there. We wouldn't discuss the codes, we could say, you know, you can adopt, blah, 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 but, you know, people just want to know that.
Are there any further questions?
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry, I think I have a question. I'm just kind of curious after listening to PJ speak about the number of times he called and the interest that he showed for the dog. I understand he's not a pool partner, or he's not someone who has the authority to pool for rescue. But and I'm kind of asking from a procedural or a policy standpoint, the fact that he must have mentioned that there was another organization that was interested in helping the dog, would have ACC thought about calling that agency or that rescue to inquire about it further before actually euthanizing the dog? Or what, I guess I'm kind of asking, like, you know, what kind of steps would we take before killing an animal?
So when it is an animal as aggressive as Floppy, we call partners that have extensive resources for in terms of behavior. It has to be somebody who's got all of that, and we really don't have many partners who have that level of behavior resource.
Would that particular rescue fall under that category?
Would Rocket Dog fall under that category? Probably not.
So even if they were to call to,
If they were to call, we would have a discussion with Bailey about, hey, here's what we've seen, here's our behavior notes, come on in and evaluate and see what you think. But that's not on our list of organizations that have extensive behavior resources. Rocket Dog is a great organization and pretty under-resourced. So this dog is, we felt needed somebody who's got extensive behavior resources.
It is,
So we called those organizations.
yeah, I remember you said you mentioned 2 organizations you called. Well, you didn't mention by name, but you said you did call 2 organizations. And one of them actually came twice, it sounded like, to.
Yes, one came once and the other came twice.
Thank you.
I just really, I guess, want to go back to the concept of the social media posts and see how we can get that enacted. I know you post pictures of the animals you've adopted on social media.
We're the ones who are
So-
looking for
so
homes,
you
absolutely.
obviously have the capability to do so. I've seen, I know exactly what PJ is talking about. I see, for some reason, it's not, I don't follow the New York Animal Care and Control Shelter, but I do follow other people from New York, and they post pictures of these animals all of the time. So I see exactly what he's talking about. There are dozens of animals that are posted every day from New York shelters that are about to be euthanized, and obviously broadcast across the country. So the signal bandwidth for adoption, increasing adoption rescue, just making the concept of these animals being the public being made aware of them, I think is just a fantastic idea. And I really want to see how we can make this possible.
I don't know what New York's situation is, but I can tell you that we have many, in this city, many pit bulls who we promote endlessly, who are medically sound, behaviorally sound, who take months to move off the adoption floor. And those are the situations that I think are the most tragic, because they sit on that floor, and sometimes they sit on that floor so much that they end up basically mentally deteriorating. And if I were going to put my focus somewhere, it would be on those dogs who would need great dogs somewhere and who need to get out. Because I would really like to focus the public's attention on those dogs who sit there forever, who are great dogs and are there for 3 to 4 months.
I don't deny that at all, but there are other animals that are apparently adoptable and rescuable that will be euthanized.
They do not fit our criteria for adoptable. A dangerous animal is not one that we are going to put in that adoptable slot. That would have to go to someone who has special resources, either personally, a fund, or most likely an adoption partner. But I think the real tragedy is those pit bulls.
Can I ask for some clarification, Director Donahue? So the system that New York City uses where they post these animals that will be euthanized, but what you're telling me is no matter who stepped up to take this dog floppy, you, ACC, would have to screen that person, interview them, and make sure that it was the right fit in what you're saying, in the interest of public safety and the well-being of the animal. Is that what you're saying? That just because you put it out there, and a lot of people say they want to help, do you still have the obligation to go through the same steps of meeting the people and making sure?
Absolutely. We cannot just put a dog that we feel is dangerous and say, oh yeah, you want it, go ahead and it'll be fine. They're all good.
Well, this
We
idea,
have a responsibility of public safety.
so maybe sadly that even with this sort of system, it might not have
I'm
helped.
happy to look at the New York system. I don't know anything about it. I think somebody on our team would have to actually call the folks in New York and see why they're doing this and whether it works for them. But I know for us, we do a lot of marketing both on Facebook and every avenue we can think of to try and market the available dogs we have who are not moving out of the shelter.
On the other topic of cats and just kind of collectively wanting your input here for the commission, because a lot of this sounds like it's come about because of changes in policy with volunteers working with ACC, whether it's with queens and kittens or other aspects of it. Currently and going forward, what's ACC's position or desires in a perfect sort of plan where you could work with volunteers properly for, say, a retired animal control officer that moves to the Bay Area, goes down to ACC and says, boy, I'd sure like to, get involved by fostering animals for you. How can I be of help in this system? What are your policies for interacting with people that do genuinely have some good experience in rescue, some abilities? How do you screen those folks? Is there any program now that's in place?
Yeah, we have a volunteer program. We have orientation. It's either every other Saturday or twice a month. I'm not sure which. We have 400 active volunteers. Last year, they donated about 27,000 hours of time. That is separate from people who foster. We have no way to measure how much time fostering takes. If they come in with a special set of skills, we are very happy to plug them into whichever program works. On the ACO side, for example, we have one volunteer reserve officer who does, he has a full-time job, so he does work for us when he can. He can't, of course, be law enforcement. And we have volunteers who work in all sorts of different areas, depending on what they're interested in.
Are there further questions for Director Donahue from the Commission? Mr. McCoskey, did you have something you'd like to add? Please step forward, thank you.
Okay. How would I know about the CIP? How would I know about the CIP if Paley wouldn't have told me? Paley told me to call about the CIP. Had I known that the dog would have been killed, I would have figured out something then and there at that moment. Because when I told the operator originally, when I made the call, and when I talked to the ACO personally, because the only positive interaction I've had with ACC, among all this, other than Deputy Steele has been wonderful since he started, has been with the ACOs. Like, they were great and they picked Fluffy up. I told him that it was a CIP and he said, yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. I wrote down my information and Paley's contact information. Let's just say that I am a liar. Let's say that Paley never told me that. She did. I assure all of you that she did. There's no reason for me to lie about it. Why wouldn't they, in the interest of saving one more animal and giving one more animal potentially a chance, call her and confirm and see what she had to offer? What no one knew, because no one asked, is that the agreement with Paley and I is I was going to fundraise whatever the dog needed to potentially see veterinary behaviorists, blah, blah, blah. Maybe the dog would have still ended up euthanized because he would have been untreatable, but at least he would have been untreatable based on a treatment plan that was attempted, not sitting in the shelter for 7 days. And back to the CIP memo, what Director Donahue said is that people thought they have a right to have a say in behavioral and medical outcomes. The people of San Francisco should have a say in how the animals of San Francisco are treated. Every single person who calls and is interested in an animal isn't at the same level. I was a licensed wildlife rehabilitator. I worked for years for veterinary clinics. I have vast networks in national and local organizations. You can't know that without communicating with these people. But I was ignored and no one called me. The other thing that I just wanted to say, because I spoke to the animal care director at Wild Care for over an hour. She assured me she never told animal control that they would not take all pigeons with fractures, they would not take pigeons with trichomonas. She said she never said that. And she said she's rarely consulted about animals that are there. So that's one thing. The other thing is just because this is important, because bats are important, even though they're not as loved as dogs and cats. There was never a policy from the health department, whether it was in '94, that demanded every single bat be killed. I did open records requests exclusively, they can't point to it. The only thing ACC can point to is a 1994 internal memo from one another talking about Dr. Fran Taylor saying that that should be killed. Fran Taylor has been retired for 20 years. I tracked her down. I called her. She told me there was no reason from a public health perspective to kill bats who hadn't bitten anyone and were not inside a home with someone sleeping or a child or someone who was unable to communicate effectively. So bats have been being killed based on like this basically laziness, and knowing that about bats, and then seeing that, because the excuse here is that well, PJ he's not a rescue group. Okay, I'm not a rescue group. So what? So we should be treated like allies, because that's what we are. That's what I am. I was an ally in helping animals. I could have been an ally to San Francisco Animal Control, not an enemy, not something to overcome. And so the thing is that treating people like me like an adversary that's what you'll get, an adversary. And that's why I responded the way I did, because these animals' lives are at stake. You can dress it up all you want. Anyone can dress it up. But killing sentient beings who desire to live when alternatives exist is unethical. And we should avoid it whenever possible.
Thanks, PJ. I don't have any questions. I just kind of, I guess the question obviously is where do we go from here? And I'm not exactly sure, quite honestly. Are there any suggestions or concepts?
Well, step one for sure is clarification with all rescue partners, what they're communicating to CIP means or doesn't mean anymore. So that problem would have been solved instantly if Haley knew how to tell you what to say.
Right.
And that to me is a big communication gap. So fix that for sure. And it seemed as though the staff, if I understood you correctly, also said or understood the language would be CIP as well.
Yeah, I mean, and the Good Samaritan or other options were never offered to me. Also, like, you need to understand that, because if the CIP or contact interested party, or what the other one is, like Good Samaritan, if any of that would have been offered to me, I would have taken it. Because what that would have afforded me is an ability to network and give ACC what they needed to try to make this work for this dog. Like, I had donors who were willing to pay thousands of dollars because they're invested in the work that I do for this animal to see behaviorists. Like, they don't know that, but they can't know that if they don't ask. They can't know that if they don't call Haley. They can't know that if they just make assumptions and kill animals.
So communication being the same.
Transparency and communication, absolutely. That's what we need more of here, not less.
Is there a reason that Haley didn't call them directly when she?
Haley,
Yeah, what is that?
Haley, it's a great question, but
PJ, could you come up to the mic?
Sure.
Sorry, thanks, just speaking it.
Director Donahue said herself that like rescuers are overwhelmed and that that like they're busy and they're doing a million things. Like I think Haley is either right now in Puerto Rico or is going to Puerto Rico right now or soon. She also was just working on her like largest fundraiser of the year around like this period. She did say that she contacted. There was some confusion about the A number because I was originally given the wrong A number by the staff who never mentioned the Good Samaritan law, but said CIP wasn't available. But in Chameleon, in known records that it said clearly that a person called and Paley said that they would pull. Why not call Paley? Even like okay, Paley should have called. All right, you're right. I wish she would have. I'm not in control of Paley. But Paley told me what she told me. That's the truth. And I trust her. I've known her for many years. But like, what about the alternative of that? What about exhausting life-saving? Someone said something in Chameleon, like maybe we should check this out. Sure, it might not amount to anything and the animal may still get euthanized, but it's still worth it. Like if they are serious in the way that they claim that they're serious about saving as many animals as possible and doing the best possible job, that means exhausting all options. And basically, in my opinion, Director Donohue's response, which is like extremely defensive and unwavering in wanting to move, is the reason why we need legislation like the draft legislation that I gave you guys and that Austin just passed today. This can't be left up to people with different priorities and different agendas because it's too important. And it should just be part of the process. You have to do this. The public has to know that these animals are at risk of being killed. Are they the only? It's not mutually exclusive. We can promote the pit bull who's there longer. But here's the reality. If people like me weren't being so alienated and ignored, we'd be the best allies and assistants in helping. But we're being pushed away and ignored, and the animals we care about are being harmed.
Unacceptable.
PJ, sorry, I have one question. No, that's okay. I guess my question
Everyone
is...
wishes I would shut up. So.
No, you're okay. So I guess the question I have for you is, you're suggesting for us to move forward, would it be codified as legislation?
To ask the supervisors to introduce legislation that would make reporting, it would make telling the finder and telling rescue groups about animals in need. Like, let's say it was a health issue. But CIP still existed, or this legislation existed. I could have gotten a call where someone said, okay, because of safety issues, you personally can't adopt this dog, but this dog is going to be put down in 48 hours. But a rescue partner could adopt this dog. That would have at least given me some 48 hours to network with other rescue organizations and network with veterinarians and talk to behaviorists to come up with a game plan to help this animal, because I was invested in that particular animal. And I'm not the only person in San Francisco who operates that way. So yes, I think legislation is important, and I'm sure someone from Gimme Shelter will say the same thing, but like they actually wrote up a letter saying that they support the same legislative language that I gave to all of you, and they're not the only organization that's going to say that. So the argument that rescue groups don't want this, there might be a few that don't want it, but casting a wider net to help more animals is always a good thing.
It's not, sorry, not just Austin, where are the other cities?
Muncie, Indiana has it. I think St. Paul has this. It's just Austin was the one that Delaware has state legislation that includes some of this legislative language. But yeah, Austin just passed it tonight, and Austin already has a better save rate than San Francisco does.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
So then is this something that we should consider and probably discuss and then decide at the next meeting to take it forward, or?
I'm not sure. I'm just asking. I just wanted to ask him what he thought, what he wanted.
So I will ask the commission if, and we will get to public comment, but if commissioners would like to continue to look into this issue, we've just received this bill proposal right now, so I don't think it was wise to make any sort of recommendation based on it. I'm assuming, Mr. McCoskey, is this the same language that Austin has used and others, or is this original to?
It's pretty much similar, like almost. So the Austin legislation is far more far-reaching than that legislation. Okay. This is just about rescue notification.
Okay.
But it's the same language as that.
Okay, thank you. I think the commissioner should have a chance to review this. We haven't really looked into this issue much, other than Mr. Tanofsky. And so that's what I would propose. And so commissioners can think about it and think about the next steps and maybe review this more carefully.
That's certainly fair enough.
Okay, so at this point, can I open public comment?
With one thing,
Yeah,
of course, the very first thing that can be done is obviously the recommunication of that status, the language that's used to the rescue partners, to staff, to ACOs, to everybody that's communicating with the public about a surrendered animal or an animal that would come into the shelter. So if that can be done, that's at least one step that doesn't take another month.
I heard Director Donahue say that she could do that. She could restate and re-disseminate that information to partner organizations. That seems reasonable. Thank you. Is that your plan to?
Sure, yes,
That's what I heard. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to open up to public comment before we close this. You may step forward if you have public comment, please. We'll keep comments limited to 3 minutes. If there are others who plan to comment, I ask that you come up and form a line if anyone else plans to speak. Therefore, we won't have delays in the progress here. Thank you.
Patricia Briggs. I just want to say I was very upset when I heard Pete talk last month. So I called ACC myself, and the shelter clerk that I spoke to was named Katya. She told me, yes, they had gotten rid of the CIP because sometimes, if they have like a dying cat, that, they can't wait to call someone. A lot of people, granted, are flakes. They say, yeah, I'm interested, and then when push comes to shove, they're nowhere to be found. So I can understand that. I said, I totally agree. As it turned out, I said, can I speak to someone higher up? I spoke to Ariana Lusinger, who was the deputy director. She was very nice. I talked to her at length. There seems to be, she did say that Pally didn't contact her, but she said that Pally is not, if I understand, I tried to get this correct, that Pally was not really a rescue partner, that she works mainly with, or a lot with Oakland Animal Services. Oakland Animal Services, a lot of dangerous dogs in Oakland, we all know that. So the thing that really disturbs me is, she said that the dog was healthy, he ate well, he had a good stool, and she also said that, she said the dog was, he was moving fluidly, he did not appear to be injured. Anyway, she said that they played with him, tried to do enrichment, as Virginia said. But the fact is that another thing. Sorry, I'm backtracking here. Katya told me one thing I was very disturbed. She said, we take care of every frigging animal that comes through these doors. I was going to ask her what she said again, but I didn't want to put her on alert. I talked to 3 different people who said they would speak to her. So anyway, not everybody's on board about the CIP because she told me it was done away with. So the bottom line is that Pete was very impressively, he knows he's on top of his game, he's very kind-hearted, he's worked with animals, he has a ton of experience. So you give it the benefit of the doubt. I mean, they used ketamine to euthanize the dog. Why couldn't ketamine or whatever they use to sedate an animal be used to give him a check? Get him out of the shelter. I know it's easier said than done, but he was a puppy. Hopefully his behavior could have been maybe modified. And, then he was in the Tenderloin with some probably meth person that was amped up on meth or, abused. There's nothing better than to take an animal like this and to try to turn him around at least a little. And ACC should have at least given a call to Rocket Dog to give it the benefit of doubt, rather than put him to sleep. And I just want to say one last thing about bats. Again, it's stigmatizing animals just like rodents. Bats, if there's rabies in this city, it would be all over the papers. I remember years ago there was a little boy that he lived in the city, he went camping outside the city, he contracted rabies and died from it. No one knew. So that was like 20 years ago. It's all over the papers if there's rabies, so it's stigmatizing animals.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Penny Martin, and this is a very personal and sad story. It happened a couple years back. October 20, 2015, I feed multiple colonies throughout San Francisco. A little old cat came to my colony, and I took it into my vet, decided to keep it. It had a bad upper respiratory, it was all natty, got a line cut. And so now it's June 3rd, 2016. I took Blondie into my vet, Linda Hall. She's at Peninsula Valley Veterinarian Hospital, because Blondie had a skin condition. got tested for ringworm, it came out negative. Linda called me back on June 8th, this is 2016. We discussed treatment for Blondie and decided that Blondie needed like a sulfur treatment. June 9th, my cat got out accidentally. My neighbor took it into ACC on June 9th, 2016. My neighbor Cal took it in at 4:18. I came home around 4:20 in the afternoon. I couldn't find Blondie. I called ACC at 4:43, approximately 15 minutes from the time I got home. I was told that Blondie was put down. I said, why? Did Blondie get hit by a car? They said no. Dr. O'Neill called me as I was en route to ACC to find out more information. I said to Doctor, why did you kill my cat? She responded, quote, the cat didn't look good. I responded back to her, I said, I just took my cat into the vet. She goes, see, your cat was sick. Now grant you, my cat did have a skin condition, but my cat wasn't even given the decency, the time where they should hold a cat for at least 3 days. The cat didn't have any thorough examination, a cursory exam. That was an old little cat. It did have dental issues, but I was not going to subject my cat to anesthesia since it was an old little kitty. I'm bringing this story up, even though it's old, because of the kill rate at ACC, their lack of following their protocols of 3-day hold, CIP, which the neighbor put on. They never even called Cal. And I'm sure Virginia is very familiar, because when I asked Virginia, please come down to talk to me, and she did, I said, why did you kill my cat? It was suffering. I go, how was it suffering? They did no exam. She didn't answer, because it was not suffering. They just killed it because it was an old little cat. Shame on you, ACC.
I'm Maria Conlon from King Shelter Cat Rescue Partner with ACC. So the email, there was an email communication from Ariana, Manager of Operations, sent on April 30th. I received it regarding the change in CIP. However, the director of our rescue, Lana, did not receive that email. King Shelter, GMS for short, regularly put CIPs on cats prior to the change in the policy. I completely support the reversal or reinstatement of this policy as a safety net, whereas like the Good Samaritan law for people is not, feral cats are explicitly excluded from that. And as we can see from just what was presented earlier, I didn't even realize that the 2 cats that we took out were semi-feral or feral. So that means that a finder would not be able to adopt those cats. It would have to be pulled by a rescue partner. And I also wanted to say, Give Me Shelter is officially on record in supporting the legislation that PJ represented. We put a document together for him, so totally support that. In fact, that's how I got started. I started following New York City Facebook pages and learned about what was going on there and the animals that were at risk. So what happens is you actually see the animal. You don't see just an ID anymore. You see the animal and the face of the animal that you could potentially help. And that's actually what got me involved in rescue in San Francisco. So if you think it doesn't work and it doesn't get more people involved, it most certainly does. So we fully support that, Lana as well, and it's like PJ said, in the changing of leadership, you might get, Virginia's here now, you might have somebody else later, people decide different things, you have that legislation in place, the animals are protected. People know they have a chance to help that animal before it goes down. I will tell you, when I was a volunteer at ACC, in the very beginning, I went in, I visited with cats, and then a couple of days later, I go back and that cat is gone, and it has been killed. And that is devastating to see. You've connected with the animal, you've helped it, and then it's gone. I just also want to say, rescues really should be reserved for animals that have no other options. I mean, I know lots of times we take cats out because they fail their behavior, they hiss, they swat, they don't like to be picked up. There's many homed cats that hate going to the vet. We all know that. Some cats act like crazy cats, even though they're the nicest cat in a home. But many of these cats we take and we put them at Petco, just 2 blocks away from ACC. These are cats that failed their behavior assessments. If we can put the cats at Petco, ACC should make these cats available so the rescue can be reserved for cats that have maybe medical problems that can't be resolved, or behavioral issues, which we end up taking a lot of the behavioral cats and put them in foster homes and find them appropriate homes. I would rather have the chance to save an animal at the final hour than walk into the shelter only to find that they were gone forever. Because euthanasia, killing is final, there's no other options. We experienced that with a couple of cats that we had agreed to take.
Thank you, Maria.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Also, just want to say quickly, suffering is a term that I hear all the time from ACC. Anyways, and suffering is like, a short-term suffering isn't always, in the end, you can have a long-term solution for it, where the cat or animal can live.
Hi, my name is Genevieve, and I'm a volunteer at ACC, and I just wanted to testify or speak about how wonderful our volunteers and our staff are. We care so much about those animals, and I understand your frustration. I hear what you're saying. It's not perfect, but we agonize about everything and every animal, and no one has been speaking about the wonderful work that ACC does. We have fantastic animals at our shelter. There's now a Facebook group that says SFACC kills. That is not being an ally. We'd love to work with you, but if you do that, you take away resources and partners from us that help the animals at our shelter. They're wonderful animals. Please, please, don't penalize the animals because you're angry. It creates a bad sentiment about what we do, and what we do is we try to save animals. Come to our shelter and meet them. This is not, I understand your frustration, but what I'm saying is there are wonderful people at ACC. We wouldn't have so many volunteers if we were bad.
We're not saying you're not. We are volunteers.
Thank you.
Policy needs to change.
Nadine May, it's incredibly arrogant for this person to imply that not a single one of us doesn't care about every single animal at ACC. Every single one. Okay? We're not out, we may be angry. That doesn't mean we're going to blame the animals. It doesn't mean we want every single animal to be saved. That's the bottom line. Henny talked about Blondie, who was killed shortly after she was brought into the shelter, even though she was not suffering. I recently found a cat sitting on the sidewalk in Chinatown who looked like he was suffering. He was emaciated, poor guy, we don't know how old he was. I didn't even bother bringing him to ACC because the vets would have killed him immediately. I took him home, I took him to my vet, Henny fostered him, and then I fostered him. He lived a very happy life for 7 months. Very happy. He had cancer, he finally died, I put him to sleep, but that cat was the happiest cat for 7 months that you could imagine. He loved being alive. We need to save every animal. We need to have the CIP back. The Good Samaritan and the foster and the finder to adopt are not safety nets. They are not safety nets at all. They basically will tell you when an animal is up for adoption. They don't tell you when an animal is going to be euthanized. We in San Francisco want to have the option to be able to save savable animals, and Maria is absolutely right. The rescues should be reserved for the animals who are not adoptable through the shelters, but then become amazingly adoptable once they get out of the shelters. So, you explain to me, isn't there something wrong with behavior testing? If an animal goes 2 blocks and is put in another cage and all of a sudden becomes a sweet adoptable animal when it's been failed by ACC and SPCA, there's something really wrong here. We need the CIP back. We need the legislation. I thank you for thinking about this. I thank you for paying attention to this. We need to be the no-kill city eventually that we would like to be for animals. Thank you.
Any further public comment? No, thank you. We will continue with our, and so we will revise this at the next meeting and review the potential legislation.
Yep.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, PJ.
Continue on, so now we are in fact at old business, and we will start with San Francisco Dog Licensing and Tethering. This is Commissioner Irani's that has been working on. San Francisco requires dog guardians to register their pets. The commission will discuss this regulation. Oh, Sally Stevens, I'm sorry, I just moved it down to old business, but they're not tonight, sorry about that.
So I think tonight will be brief because most of the follow-up questions regarding licensing were for Deputy Director Steele. And my understanding is that he hasn't had a chance yet to fully look into this issue, so I thought maybe we could defer it to next month, or when do you think good timing would be to discuss?
Yeah, it is a priority. I have started to take a look at it and gathering information and hoping to make recommendations for next month. So come back to this commission and they know where things are at. But obviously we need to get online licensing back.